if you're having problems with going over the top on some of your emotions, over a period of time, as you take those under control, you will become more resilient, and you'll be able to handle that stress, and you'll have better stress management. And if you have better stress management, you're going to have better arguments, better conflict with your spouse. Things will go better. And this is all about self-management. And you're the only one that can do that. No one can manage your emotions for you.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Master Level Marriage Podcast, where we discuss all things marriage and where you can discover the tools that you need to have a strong and healthy relationship. Our host, author, and marriage coach, Dr. Ronnie Gaines, will unpack many facets of a marital relationship as he dives into the dynamics of a marriage. In each episode, you will learn what it takes to succeed in your relationship and win in your marriage. Whether you are in the planning stages or have been married for several years, our desire is to help you grow and enrich your life as a couple and become a success story. Subscribe or follow us and be notified of each episode. Please leave us a review and help us help other couples. For more information, visit www.masterlevelmarriage.com. Thanks for checking us out. Now here's your host, Dr. Ronnie Gaines.
Welcome to the Master Level Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Gaines, and I'm so glad that you're here with me on this episode today. Wow, we're moving closer and closer to our 25th episode, where I'm going to have a special guest on that day, and I'm looking forward to that. It's a great friend of mine, Brent Sharp. Used to be a supervisor of mine as I was going through my marital and family therapy degree, and I worked for him in his counseling firm, and so got to see many clients in his firm, and I enjoyed working with them so much. Looking forward to having him on the show. We're going to talk about a very particular thing with him on the show. He's created this, what he calls the magic 4%. I'm not going to give it away on this show, but just be looking forward to that. It will ultimately set your marriage up throughout the week for marriage success. So let's be on here with me on that. Looking forward to my 25th episode. Wow, we're moving closer and closer to that. I'm glad you're here with me on this podcast today as we kind of do a second part of the emotional intelligence. I'm going to move into the second part. I'm going to make 3 parts out of it because I want to actually spend a little bit more time on the second set of the domains. There's 4 domains. I'm going to do 2 on this podcast, and then we'll do 2 more next week. I want to spend a little time with those, and I don't want it to be too long. So hang out with me on these 3 episodes on emotional intelligence. You know, I just got back from India here just a few weeks ago, and as you maybe have seen on a couple of the episodes that I shot right in the New Delhi airport with a friend of mine. But, you know, as I go into these other countries, and this is the first time that I've actually had the opportunity to go into India, and incredible place, that part of Asia, and the people are phenomenal. You know, getting to meet new people and getting to see new people, new cultures, learning the different cultures of people is amazing to me. I love going into other countries. And on this trip, I had the opportunity to do a full day of a marriage conference to about 500 people, and husbands and wives. Many were pastors and their wives, and then some of the people from the church. And you know, this is the first time I've been to India, but I've been to Africa, into 3 different countries doing marriage conferences, and it's really unique to see other cultures and talk with them through their marriage patterns, their strategies, and things like that. And I found that, man, we're all just alike. I mean, we go through the same problems. We go through the same issues. We really do encounter some of the exact same things. And, you know, that's really encouraging to see other cultures experiencing the same thing. Now, I know there's a little bit different and there are different cultures. They have different known rules, if you will, of how over the years they have developed these different rules in the home and things like that. But ultimately, they function just like we do. There's a few cultural differences, but I was so pleased in this last trip I took, and got to meet some great people. I hope they're listening to the podcast, but I met some great people. And in India, they have a lot of arranged marriages where maybe the parents help them find someone and they arrange these marriages. And it doesn't matter whether it's an arranged marriage or you picked your spouse. The principles and the strategies are still the same. As I talked to one couple there in India, and begin to question and ask some questions about their culture and about, how this arranged marriage works. There's a really unique part of this where in America we go through a dating process, or a few years ago some might have called it a courting, where they did a courtship. But ultimately, a lot of us, when we go through a dating process, we learn a lot about our girlfriend, our boyfriend, through a dating process of hanging out, watching each other on how you react to other people, how you treat other people, and just learning the characteristics of each other, personalities. And we have that time where we can date. There's not a real high level commitment. And so we date, we have fun, and we learn, and there's not a lot of trust issues. One of you might flirt a little bit with another person, and the other one might get a little upset, and maybe you get a elbow in the rib or something like that. But ultimately, there's no trust issues, and they begin to learn each other, back and forth. They're in this, what we call the in love experience, where some might over the years call it puppy love. And we can't do any wrong. The other one, you do something wrong, they didn't do anything wrong, or the little quirks, the little things that ultimately can be the most annoying things. We kind of accept those, and we just laugh them off and giggle and have such a good time. We're spending this time learning all about each other. And unfortunately, in some of these arranged marriages, you don't have that lower level of commitment. I believe that dating is a commitment. I believe that you make a commitment to that person. And if you're dating someone, make a commitment to them and stay true to them, stay loyal to them, commit to them. But ultimately, you're not in a high level commitment where, if you decide to break up, there's not some major process of breaking up. You just, one of you might get hurt over the deal, but it's easy. You just break up. But when you're married, it's another level of commitment. And as I visited with a couple there in India, they were struggling with a few little issues, but I began to question them about coming together, not being able to date, not being able to learn about each other. And this was a dynamic that these couples have to work through. And as here in America, we date for a while and learn each other, and then we get married. We've experienced their personalities. We've learned a lot about them. But here, all at once, before you ever meet them or, become committed to them, they just meet, get married, and they begin life. And one of the things that I talked to them about, and we were talking about the difference between dating and this arranged marriage, was they are in the process right now of doing all the things that most of us in America would do in a dating process. They're learning each other. They're learning all about their personalities, their expectations, and it's difficult. You're in a high level commitment, and you can't just say, you know what, this dating's not working, I'll find someone else. I'm sure they could get a divorce, but they're committed and they're very loyal to their parents. They're very respectful, and they honor their parents. So they follow the rules and they follow the things of their parents. And so if one comes from a different household, as they do here in America, sometimes even though we come from a different household, we bring our family of origin with us, and it could be somewhat a problem. I joke about this in a lot of the couples that I see. I say, I've had many couples that they get in a big fight over what shelf the cereal box goes on, because when they grew up, it may have been over the refrigerator, and then the other one, as they grew up, it might have been over or underneath the counter or sitting on the counter or whatever, and they get in these arguments about where that cereal box goes. And I tell them, stop arguing about your family of origin and the way it was at home, and make a new place together. Find a new place for the cereal box. That seems very trivial, but we get into some arguments over some minor things. And as I talked to this couple, one of the things I saw was what we're going to talk about in this episode is emotional intelligence. That they didn't have the opportunity to learn each other and see each other's emotions and experience that before they got married. They were married, and then now they're experiencing it. They're creating that in love experience in a married atmosphere, a married environment. It's very difficult, and so I can see how that can be such a problem. But still, they encounter the same things that you and I encounter in a marriage. Marriage is marriage. I believe I could take two people and put them together, and if they do the right things over an extended period of time, as long as they're attracted to each other, they can learn to be married. And I think that's what you do here in this arranged marriage, is you just do the right things. And it's the same way here in America. Even if we've dated for a while, we know each other and we learn all about each other, get in the relationship and do things right. That's why in this podcast is about the strategies and things of just doing the right things. And sometimes, we've talked about this, the 5 love languages. Sometimes the things we do, we think are the right things, but the question might be, are we doing the right thing for our spouse? So it's important to be intentional about everything we do. And this, emotional intelligence is huge when it comes to a person and the people they're around. Because I've learned this, that we don't live in a vacuum as an individual. We're not isolated in our emotions. We're not isolated in what we do. We're not isolated in our actions. We don't live in a vacuum. We are in community everywhere we go, whether we're married, whether we're at work, whether we're at church. It doesn't matter where you go, the ball field, you're still in community. You're still associating with people, and you're not alone. You're not isolated. So when it comes to this idea of emotional intelligence, is we have to learn how to be in public, how to be around people. And I think some of this, we need to take new lessons and go through different strategies and different teachings on emotional intelligence, because I don't think that sometimes we handle it properly. I know that I can be a very dramatic person, and sometimes I don't handle my emotions correctly. I'm learning how to do that. And last week I told the story about the young man that is just having all kinds of problems with these emotions, and we have to take control of that. We're the only one that control our emotions, or control the actions of our emotions. And I've been working with several people in the last couple of weeks, and we've been talking through this idea of emotional intelligence and how important it is. It's really, it's a key element in social interaction and just being around people and being yourself. It's okay to be yourself. We don't want to break the spirit of people. You don't want to break your spirit, but you've got to take control of your emotions. Your emotions will cause all kinds of problems if we don't take them under control. And so there are four domains, if you will, of emotional intelligence. But before I go into those four domains and list those, I want to give you a definition that I've created, and I'm sure there's many definitions out there, but I created this definition to give us an idea of emotional intelligence in its simplest form, if you will. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage and effectively use one's own emotions and the emotions of others to navigate social interactions, build relationships, and make well-informed decisions. Again, this is a very kind of a long definition, but you've got to, let me read it again, and I want to slow down just a little bit because I want you to understand, again, that we don't live in a vacuum, that it's not just about me. It's about those around me as much as it is about me. And so again, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage. We recognize, understand, and manage. We talked about this a little bit in last week's episode, but it's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage and effectively use one's own emotions and the emotions of others to navigate social interactions. You're going to be around people. You're going to be around people at work. You're going to be around people in your home. You're going to be around people at the ball field. You're going in church. Wherever you go, you're going to be around people, and we have to navigate social interactions. We have to build relationships and make well-informed decisions. Now, there are four domains of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness and self-management. Those two, I like to call them kind of out of the four domains, we kind of group those together as one key, maybe key group. And then the second group is grouped together, or the second two are grouped together. So you have you have self-awareness and self-management. Then the other group is social awareness and relationship management. Now, we talked about them somewhat last week, but I'm going to break these down. I'm going to break down two of those today. I want to take the top two, which these are the ones that you maintain yourself. Now, sometimes on the other two, you don't have any control over other people's emotions, and you don't have any control over anyone else. You can only control you. So I want to start with this first one, which is self-awareness. And the first point that I want us to make with this first domain is understanding personal emotions. This is where we're self-aware within our relationship, within our marriage. We're self-aware of our emotions. We understand our emotions. We define why we're angry. We define why we're anxious. We define why we're happy. The different emotions. We define those when we begin to understand them in a way of I understand that I display this emotion. I understand that this emotion affects me I'm going to experience this emotion. So we begin to understand our personal emotions. And then once we understand them, it helps us communicate our feelings to our spouse. I know you men, when we talk about sharing your feelings, you start checking out a little bit. But it truly is, when we understand our personal emotions, we need to communicate these feelings effectively. We need to have conversations. We need to talk about how this made me feel. I felt angry, and the reason I felt angry is because of this. We need to have these hard conversations and begin to effectively communicate our feelings. When we communicate our feelings effectively, this helps us promote intimacy with our spouse. I feel like that sometimes when I express my emotions and I talk about my feelings to my wife, and this is how I felt, this is kind of how I felt through this situation, it begins to develop something between us, this emotional intimacy, that we're closer. We feel closer because we're able to open up. And I think a lot of this is when we begin to understand it, and then we begin to communicate it to our spouse. This is whenever we find closeness, and I think we can become closer than we have ever been by understanding the emotions and communicating them clearly. A second part of this self-awareness is identifying strengths and weaknesses. It's so easy to see someone else's weakness, and we can point those out many times. And sometimes we have a difficulty maybe seeing our own weaknesses. But I think that if we become self-aware, we really analyze it, we start understanding our strengths and our weaknesses. And when we're able to do that, this allows us to get mutual support from our spouse. Is whenever we can understand that there are strengths, there are weaknesses, and I'm not talking about naming your weaknesses and it's really a strength. Sometimes we want to get crazy with our weaknesses. My weaknesses, I just love people too much, or whatever. My weaknesses, I care too much. Well, that's not really a weakness. We have weaknesses. We need to know them. We need to understand them, and we need to identify these strengths and weaknesses, and to be able to collaborate between each other and express those strengths and weaknesses, because ultimately, and I'm sure you're the same way, my wife's strengths help me in my weakness. We're total opposites. And I know that my strengths help her in her weaknesses. And when we understand those and communicate those, we can help each other. And when we collaborate that together, we begin to talk through things where we're weak, where we need help. And come on, men, if you're a man out there and you're listening to this, it's okay to let your spouse influence you, and it's okay to ask your wife to help you in your weakness. The third element of self-awareness is setting personal boundaries. We each have expectations, and when we set personal boundaries, it allows us to communicate our expectations and also hear and understand the expectations of our spouse. And when we set these boundaries, when we hear an expectation, we're able to fulfill that for our spouse, and they're able to fulfill that for us. And we communicate our needs. We communicate clearly our needs. Sometimes we feel it feels weird to communicate your expectations because sometimes we don't present it in the right way. My wife has this saying that says, it's all about presentation. It's not about the topic. It's not about the problem. It's the presentation. She's been teaching me over the years that whenever there's something I need to say, something I need to tell her or tell someone else, I'm very plain spoken. I'm very blunt. But sometimes what I say is not wrong. It's presented incorrectly. So when it comes to setting personal boundaries, set those boundaries where you don't communicate things in an improper way. That we communicate them, we communicate our needs, our expectations in a very loving, in the good book, the Bible, it says, speak your truth in love. When you set personal boundaries for yourself, you're able to speak your truth in love, speak your complaints, speak your expectations, and let your spouse know your needs. And this moves us into the fourth element of self-awareness, and that's goal alignment. Goal alignment. This is where, when we become self-aware of our emotions, our feelings, and the responses, when we begin to understand all of this, it gives us a chance to really align our goals with our spouse. It really does foster this shared purpose that we have with each other. And so when we understand when we have self-awareness when it comes to our emotions, and we become emotionally intelligent, then we're able to communicate these goals, we collaborate the goals, and we find connecting goals, or we find goals that we share together, and that gives us an opportunity to really strengthen the marriage and get our goals into alignment. Well, the fifth thing is embracing authenticity. Listen, be real. It's one thing to have a problem, to the emotions that come with frustration, the emotions that come with anger, but we need to embrace authenticity. Embracing this authenticity within the marriage really does allow us to express our true selves. It's okay to express yourself, okay? Sometimes we feel defensive because we're getting ready to express ourselves, and it leads to, again, a improper presentation. But we should have the space. You should give your spouse the space to express themselves. Now, it's one thing to express yourself in a negative way, but it's another to express yourself in a genuine, authentic way. Communicate your complaint, communicate your needs, communicate your emotion. This is how it made me feel. This is why I'm angry. This is why I'm frustrated. When we can bring our emotions into alignment through self-awareness, we will be able to, it brings mutual trust and understanding from our spouse. They have a tendency when we express those. I mean, we can't go through life and not be angry. We can't go through life and not foster some kind of emotion. All we have to do is communicate it and embrace the authenticity of our feelings, authenticity of our true selves, and be able to express it in a way, and learn how to express it in a way that will ultimately foster intimacy in our marriage. I want to go into the second domain, which is self-management. And really, this does follow the definition that I gave you on emotional intelligence. As we recognize, we understand, but now we're able to manage it. And once we recognize and understand, we have that ability, as I talked on those last 5 points, on the awareness and what it can do. And I'm going to go a little bit into just a couple things on self-management, because you're the only one that control this. No one can control you. No one can control your emotions. When you get angry, what are you going to do with it? When you get stressful, what are you going to do with it? When you get frustrated, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in your relationship, in your marriage, when things don't go right? You don't agree with what your spouse has said. You don't agree with their idea, or you don't agree with their reasoning on why this argument happened, or the conflict. You don't agree with them on the conflict. It's okay. I tell couples all the time, it's okay not to agree. You don't have to agree on everything. But I do believe that we need to hear and understand them and understand why, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in the next episode. But you are the only control that can control your emotions. The emotions are going to happen. There's going to be times you're going to get frustrated. There's going to be times you're going to get angry. But you have to manage those. No one can manage those for you. And the way we do that is one of the aspects of self-management is stress management. That this effective stress management, and listen, stress is what's killing so many people today. We call it something else, but ultimately stress leads to many different physical conditions. And I know that there's some data out there that will show that marriages under stress causes the lack of life longevity, causes health problems. It causes so many issues in our life. And so one of the things that we do when we recognize and understand our emotions is to bring it under submission, if you will, or management. And it's up to you to manage that. And when we manage stress, then this helps enable our partner to support us. When we go over the top and we freak out and we spaz out because of something that wasn't quite right, we basically our partner, our wife, our husband, it really does put a barrier between us. You know, I have a grandson that many times will just he's had problems with this since he was a young child of learning how to manage his emotions. He gets upset about something and he just literally has a meltdown. And it's gotten a little bit better over the years. He's 6 years old, so his mom and we're trying to teach between his mom and his parents and us. We're teaching him how to manage those, and he gets in trouble quite often because if something is not there in front of him that he thought should have been, maybe it's after school or something, and he loses it. If he's been told something and things don't happen the way that they had planned, it's like he loses it and he begins to cry, and he just doesn't know how to grab a hold of those emotions, and it puts him in a state of stress. We do this in our own relationships. We put ourselves in a state of stress, and when we do that, it's very difficult. When we're in a high state of stress, we don't think correctly, and we don't manage our thoughts correctly because stress puts us over the edge. And you'll see many people that'll get stressed out about something, and they shake, they can't reason, they can't think. So what we have to do is we have to bring these emotions and this stress under management. And when we do that, it will help foster some resilience in you. The more you do it, the more you bring these things under the power of your management, then you become more resilient. And I'm going to tell you, after a period of time, whenever you can actually take these under control, if you're having problems with going over the top on some of your emotions, over a period of time, as you take those under control, you will become more resilient. And you'll be able to handle that stress, and you'll have better stress management. And if you have better stress management, you're going to have better arguments, better conflict with your spouse. Things will go better. And this is all about self-management. And you're the only one that can do that. No one can manage your emotions for you. Well, the second thing that I want you to see from self-management, and we could talk about many things on management. How do you manage? How do you manage your emotions? What happens when you get angry? What do? How do you do a cool down? How do you cool yourself down once you've had a breakdown in your emotions? You may have a way that you express your emotions and manage them, where you can express them and yet control them. If you're listening to this and you have a way that you control your emotions and keep yourself from going over the top, put a message down below. Put a remark whatever platform you're listening, whether it's YouTube, whether you're listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever. Put a comment. I want to hear from you. This is how I feel like we can interact in this. I want to hear it from you. When you become aware of your emotions and they begin to flare, what do you do to bring your emotions into check? What do you do to bring stress management? Now, for me, if I have a tendency to go overboard, I have several different ways. I do what I call a SMART process of it's called. I'm not going to go through it on this episode. I don't have the time, but maybe in a future episode. But it's called SMART. It's an acronym for spiritually or scripturally motivated anxiety release technique. It's a way that I calm myself down. I can use a breathing technique, and it gets my blood flowing again, gets oxygen back flowing to my brain the way that it should, and it calms me. And so some other ways I do it is I pray, or I listen to some kind of worship music or something, some kind of spiritual music that helps me calm my mind. I may go for a jog. I love to run, so I might jog, and it cools me down. It brings my stress management down. And what do you do? Well, the second thing is emotional regulation, which could also fall into somewhat the same alignment as stress management. And practicing this helps each person in the marriage to manage the conflict together. So emotional regulation, we can do this together. And when we can constructively manage our emotions together, we're allies. We're in this together, and we can have our wife or husband help us manage that. And we through some self-talk or talking to each other and talking. Maybe your spouse needs to talk you off the ledge. And once we do this, when we have disagreements, we can do this more constructively. We can handle things better. Listen, this emotional intelligence, I believe the first two elements, the first two the first two parts of these domains are key to you. Now we'll cover in the next episode, we'll cover the second two of the four domains. But today, I want you to take control of your emotions. Be emotionally intelligent. Listen, it'll save you stress. It'll save you heartache. It'll save you arguments. It'll save you from conflict stacking. It'll save you from walking out the door and slamming the door. It'll keep your stress level down if you will control your emotions and be emotionally intelligent. Now today, I know this has probably been a little bit longer than most of our podcasts, but I just really wanted to communicate these domains. And as we talk about this emotional intelligence, I think it's so important that not only do we learn this ourselves, but we teach it to our kids, and we teach it to our grandkids even. We teach them that it's okay to feel these emotions, but it's not okay to go over the top and be emotionally unintelligent. We have to be emotionally intelligent. And that is, first of all, recognizing, then understanding, and managing. And next week, we'll talk about the other two domains of emotional intelligence. And I believe once you get through these 3 weeks of emotional intelligence, I think you'll do things differently. And I think that you'll start recognizing some of the things that you should have recognized before, but maybe just didn't think about it. But now you start recognizing these emotions. And listen, I've learned that the better we get at it, we start seeing the emotions rise before they get out of hand. And if we can catch them at an early level, an early phase, we have a better tendency to keep our heart rates down. We keep our stress down. We keep our mouth in check whenever we are talking to our spouse. If we don't let our emotions completely go overboard, we keep what we say in check. We're careful about how we present something to our spouse. We really learn how to manage that, and we learn how to talk to each other in a way that we should talk to each other. And we might not, at this point, we keep our emotions in check. We won't say things that are hurtful. We won't do things that are hurtful, yet we will say and do the things that are necessary to bring healing and bring closure to and find resolution in our conflicts. It can be done. You just have to learn how to control your emotions and become emotionally intelligent. I hope you've enjoyed this today. If you have, send it to someone, share it with someone. Let someone else hear what you're hearing and become emotionally intelligent. Let your spouse hear it if they haven't heard it. Listen to it together and talk about it. Talk about your emotions together and become healthy in your relationship. If you would, go down below and leave a comment. Leave a remark of some kind. Let me know what you do to bring your emotions into check. Leave a review. Let us know what you think. And let's do this together and learn together. And I hope you've enjoyed this show, and I can't wait to see you on the next show. And always remember this: be your best self, live out your full potential, and experience your best marriage. I will see you on the next show.